Imagine stepping onto a luxury cruise and realizing the ship itself is alive. Cabins disappear, passengers vanish, and shadows follow you wherever you go. Tonight, you'll hear 4 chilling stories that prove some voyages should never happen. Watch closely and don't blink. Dim the lights, subscribe to Midnight Outcry, hit the bell icon, and brace yourself, because the nightmare begins now. Could you survive the ship's dark secrets? I still hear the voices when the ocean is quiet. Soft, low, like a murmur carried on the tide. But back then, I thought it was just the ship's engines humming, or the wind slipping between the decks. I had no idea what I was stepping into when I boarded that cruise. My name is Daniel Reed. I'm a history teacher from Charleston, South Carolina. I'd saved for 2 years to take this trip, a 2-week cruise through the Caribbean. It was supposed to be a break from my lectures, from grading, from the empty house I returned to each night. My wife had passed away 3 years earlier, and I thought maybe, just maybe, a little sunlight and salt air would help lift the weight that never seemed to leave my chest. The first day was everything I expected: dazzling pools, smiling passengers, and drinks that were stronger than they looked. My cabin was small but cozy, with a porthole view of nothing but blue ocean. I remember lying in bed that first night, hearing the faint rhythm of water slapping against the hull, and thinking I might finally get some rest, but something tugged at me. Around 2 a.m., I woke to a sound I couldn't place. Not the usual creaks or groans of a ship settling into the sea. It was more deliberate, a low chant, faint, echoing like it was being carried through the ventilation system. I told myself it was drunk passengers on a balcony singing after midnight. But deep down, something felt wrong. The next morning, I asked about it. The crew smiled too quickly, brushed it off. "Just the engine, sir. Takes a night or 2 to get used to." Their voices were polite, but their eyes avoided mine. Later that day, during a scheduled History of the Ship talk in the lounge, the cruise director mentioned the vessel was originally a cargo ship before being refitted for passengers. That shouldn't have stood out, but when he said it, a shiver crawled up my spine. Cargo ships aren't designed for luxury. They're designed for weight, for storage, for transport. And for a second, I wondered, what exactly had this ship carried before us? That night, the chanting returned. Louder. Closer. I pressed my ear against the wall, and I swear I could make out words. Not English. Something older, wetter, like the sound of waves crashing twisted into syllables. When I opened my cabin door, the hallway was empty, too empty like the entire deck was holding its breath. By the 3rd night, I stopped trying to sleep. Instead, I followed the sound. Barefoot, creeping down the hallway, down stairwells that smelled faintly of rust and damp rope. The chants grew stronger the deeper I went. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would give me away. And then, at the bottom of a service stairwell, I found a door that shouldn't have been there. It wasn't marked on the deck maps I'd memorized earlier. No sign, no handle, just a black metal door with streaks of salt staining its surface. From behind it, the chanting rose like a tide. I froze. For one horrible moment, the voices stopped, like they knew I was standing there. The silence was worse than the chanting. I backed away slowly, every step deliberate, until I was back in the safety of my cabin. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was now aware of me. The following morning at breakfast, I overheard 2 passengers whispering. One of them, a woman in her 60s, leaned in close to the other and said, "Another one didn't come back last night." Her companion shushed her, but I caught the words. My spoon trembled in my hand. Passengers were vanishing, and I had found the door where the voices gathered. I couldn't ignore the door anymore. Every creak of the hallway, every whisper of the wind through the portholes pulled me toward it. That night, I slipped out of my cabin again, heart hammering so loudly, I feared it would alert whatever waited behind that metal barrier. The hallway was darker than usual, as if the ship itself was holding its breath. The faint smell of brine mixed with something metallic, coppery, like blood. My bare feet pressed against the cold steel, leaving prints I knew would vanish by morning. When I reached the door, I noticed faint symbols etched into the metal, swirling, interlocking shapes that pulsed almost imperceptibly in the dim light. The chanting came again, louder, more urgent, vibrating through the door. I hesitated. My rational mind screamed that I should run back to my cabin, lock myself in, call the crew or the Coast Guard. But curiosity, or maybe fear itself, propelled me forward. The door was locked, but not in any conventional way. I pressed my palm against it, and the symbols glowed faintly, warm against my skin. A pressure, almost like water pressing inward, tried to push me back. And then, slowly, impossibly, the door swung open. Inside was a chamber that smelled of the sea at low tide, wet and decaying. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, moving even though no wind stirred. Lanterns flickered, casting eerie patterns across the stone floor. In the center, a large circle was etched into the deck, filled with seawater. Inside it, indistinct shapes shifted, half-formed, like people submerged, but never fully drowned. At first, I thought I was seeing reflections. Then I realized the shapes were alive, trapped. The chanting was coming from them, rising and falling in a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. And then I saw the crew. They weren't moving, not really. They were arranged around the circle, hands outstretched, heads bowed. But their faces weren't human anymore. Their eyes were black pits, and their skin had a strange waxy sheen. The edges of their mouths twitched, forming silent smiles. I stumbled backward. A single beam of light hit a figure at the center of the circle. A passenger, pale, lifeless, eyes wide open. The moment I looked, a hand shot out from the water, grabbing the edge of the circle, pulling him under. The surface rippled, and then it was gone. The chanting stopped. Silence fell like a weight on my chest. The captain appeared at the entrance of the chamber, calm, deliberate. "You shouldn't be here," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it filled the entire room. The sea remembers. The ship chooses its offerings. I tried to speak. My throat was dry. Why are you doing this?" His smile was thin. "Not we, the ship. It demands. We serve until it takes what it's owed." The words hit me harder than any wave. This wasn't just superstition. It wasn't a haunted ship in the stories you tell at dinner. This was a ritual, a systematic, living thing, and I was standing in its center. A sound behind me made me spin. Another passenger, someone I recognized from dinner, stood in the shadows, their eyes blank, hands folded neatly. They didn't speak, but the message was clear. If I stepped closer, I would be next. I backed away slowly, tripping over a rope that slithered like a snake. The captain's eyes followed me, unblinking. Then the floor beneath the circle began to ripple, like the water itself had become alive. A cold, viscous wave surged toward me. I stumbled, almost falling, and scrambled backward out of the chamber, slamming the door behind me. For a long time, I leaned against it, gasping, my fingers pressed into the cool metal. The chanting had stopped, replaced by the low, constant groan of the ship in the storm. By morning, another 3 passengers were missing. Their cabins empty, beds made, belongings gone. When I asked the crew, they just smiled, too polite, eyes too dark. I realized then that the ship wasn't just haunted. It wasn't just cursed. It was alive, and it was hungry. And I had no idea how long it had been watching me. I couldn't stay hidden any longer. The ship had tasted my fear, and every step I took on the metal decks seemed to echo through the corridors, announcing my presence. The passengers who remained were moving slower now, staring blankly ahead, murmuring things under their breath that I couldn't understand. I needed answers. I had to know why this ship demanded these offerings, why the crew had become what they had become. I slipped into the lower service decks again, sticking to the shadows. The smell of salt and rust hit me before I even saw the door, the same black metal door from before, the source of every whisper, every chant. Inside, the circle pulsed with water again. But this time, there were more figures, dozens, shapes half submerged, reaching, clawing, moaning silently. The chanting had started without me noticing, rising in layers, overlapping. I realized it wasn't coming from just one place. The chamber itself hummed with the sound of hundreds of voices, voices of the passengers who had vanished. The captain stood at the edge, hands clasped behind his back, as if supervising some cosmic operation. The crew formed a perfect ring around the circle, and I noticed something terrifying. They weren't holding the passengers in the water. They were feeding them. Each motion of the hands, each tilt of the head, seemed to push life out of the trapped bodies and into the ship. A sickening understanding hit me. The ship wasn't just alive, it was sustained by the fear and bodies of the passengers. Each disappearance, each offering made it stronger, allowed it to continue sailing despite the storms. The waves, the lightning, the endless horizon, it was all part of the ritual, a signal that the ship's hunger was constant and insatiable. I stumbled backward, almost falling into the water. That's when I saw my own name etched into the edge of the circle. Not in ink, not in carvings, but appearing in ripples of the water itself, like the ship was writing it with invisible fingers. "No," I whispered, but the circle responded. A wave licked the edge, as if acknowledging me, calling me. I turned to flee, but a hand grabbed my shoulder. One of the crew, my favorite waiter, a man who had smiled at me the first day, looked at me, eyes black and empty. "It's your turn," he said softly. Not a threat, a statement, a command. Panic surged. I ran, twisting through the corridors, avoiding the main decks, seeking anything stairs, lifeboats, doors that could lead me off the ship. But the storm wasn't natural. It shifted with the ship, waves blocking exits, lightning cracking to form barriers. It was as if the ocean itself was rearranging to trap me. Finally, I reached the observation deck. The horizon stretched endlessly. No land, no rescue, only water dark as ink. And then I saw the shapes rising from the sea passengers who had disappeared, floating just beneath the waves, their faces pressed against the surface like they were trying to scream, trying to warn me. The ship groaned. The wind howled. And at that moment, I understood the cruelest truth. There was no escape. The ship had claimed me long before I ever stepped on board. Every step, every glance, every fear I felt had been feeding it. The storm wasn't just weather. It was the ship's will manifesting, keeping me contained. A door at the far end of the deck creaked open. The captain appeared again, calm as ever, gesturing toward me. "Join us, Daniel. The sea remembers. The ship provides. You belong here now." I screamed and ran. But the water surged. The deck twisted beneath my feet, and the horizon swallowed me whole. And then, silence. I awoke in my cabin. The ocean was calm, the sun shining. At first, I thought it was a dream, until I saw the logbook on the desk, open. Pages blank, except for one line. "Daniel, taken." The door of my cabin creaked. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I froze, because I knew the ship wasn't finished with me. I didn't move. The knocks came again, each one slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. I wanted to run, to throw myself out the porthole into the ocean, but my body refused. My mind raced, searching for a loophole, a mistake, anything that could break the inevitability of what I felt coming. The door creaked open by itself. No hands, no force, just a silent, deliberate swing. The hallway beyond was bathed in dim red emergency light, stretching impossibly long. And there he was, the captain, as calm as ever, with a faint smile. Behind him, the crew half human, half something else, black eyes glinting in the light. "You're part of it now," he said softly. "Every fear, every step you took, every secret wish to escape, it brought you here." I staggered back, pressing myself against the wall. My cabin felt unreal, like it had been stretched, reshaped by the ship's will. The floor groaned under invisible weight, the walls pulsated like a heartbeat, and the horizon outside the porthole rippled unnaturally, as if the ocean itself were breathing. Then I felt it cold, viscous, like water sliding over my feet. My toes sank slightly into the deck. I looked down. The wood wasn't solid anymore. It shifted, flowing like black liquid. Shapes twisted beneath the surface, faces contorted in silent screams. The chanting returned, rising from everywhere and nowhere, echoing inside my skull. "No, this isn't real," I whispered, shaking my head, pressing my palms into my ears. But the chanting grew louder. The deck tilted beneath me, and I fell forward. I landed in the center of the cabin. The logbook lay open in front of me. Pages fluttered wildly, as if a wind blew only inside the room. Words formed on the paper in dark, wet ink. "Daniel, taken. Welcome to the crew." A hand grabbed mine. Cold, strong, not human. My heart froze as I realized I couldn't pull away. The shapes in the floor surged upward, forming limbs, faces, mouths, all clawing toward me. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the ship itself. The captain knelt in front of me, eyes hollow yet commanding. "It is not death, Daniel. It is continuation. You serve, the sea provides, the ship remembers." I tried to resist. I kicked, punched, anything but. It was useless. The crew closed in. Shadows wrapped around my legs, pulling me down. The air thickened, became heavy, tasting of salt and rust, and something metallic I couldn't place. And then, darkness. I woke, or thought I did, on the observation deck. Sunlight glared off the water, calm, endless. A cruise ship in perfect blue seas. I rubbed my eyes. Maybe it was a nightmare. Maybe I'd finally escaped. Until I saw the logbook. Open, blank. Except for one line written in fresh ink. "Daniel, next voyage." A soft knocking echoed behind me. 3 deliberate knocks. The porthole fogged as if someone or something was pressing against it from the outside. I turned slowly, and for a fraction of a second I saw myself gray, glassy-eyed, smiling just like the captain. And I understood. The ship doesn't end. The storm never ceases. And I am now part of it. So, if you ever board a cruise, and the ocean feels too quiet, the air too heavy, and the smiles too perfect, remember me, and remember this. The ship is watching, and it always remembers. Welcome aboard. Story 2. I never believed in curses. Ghost stories were for campfires and YouTube videos, not real life. That was before I boarded the Aurora Tide. My name is Lila Martinez. I'm a freelance photographer from Miami, and I signed up for this Caribbean cruise to capture sunsets and ship interiors for a travel magazine. I wanted color, life, laughter, not nightmares. The first day was perfect. Sunlight glinted off the white decks. Families laughed by the pool, and the crew welcomed me with professional smiles. I carried my camera everywhere, snapping pictures of the intricate railings, the grand dining hall, the glittering waves beyond the bow. Everything looked ordinary, too ordinary. By nightfall, the first odd thing happened. I was reviewing photos in my cabin when I noticed something strange. A man sitting at dinner with me in every shot, smiling politely, yet when I looked outside the frame or back at the dining log, he didn't exist. At first, I thought it was a camera glitch. But then, at breakfast the next morning, a child pointed at him while giggling. "That's funny, Mommy. I don't remember him last night." The crew avoided my questions. Their smiles never faltered, but their eyes flicked toward the upper decks, then back to me, and they spoke in hushed tones. That evening, I wandered toward the top deck. The sunset painted the sky, gold and crimson, and the ocean stretched endlessly. A low wind carried a whisper, faint and unintelligible, curling around my ears. I thought I imagined it until a shadow passed behind me. A figure, tall, too still, standing at the railing. "Hello?" I called softly. No reply. Just the sound of waves. I returned to my cabin, unsettled. That night, the whispering returned, stronger, wrapping around the vents, as if the ship itself was murmuring secrets. My photographs began to show things I hadn't captured. Doors that didn't exist. Stairwells stretching impossibly. Passengers with faces half hidden, eyes empty and staring. By the third night, reality started to fray. Passengers I'd spoken to disappeared without a trace, and the ship seemed to stretch overnight hallways longer, stairwells steeper, corridors twisting like mazes. The crew never acknowledged it. and the captain's speeches on deck sounded hollow, rehearsed, like he was reading from a script written in another language. Then I found the journal, a leather-bound book tucked beneath a floor panel in the lounge, damp and smelling of salt and something metallic. Its pages were filled with detailed accounts of previous voyages, names, dates, even photographs that looked eerily like my own. The entries described the ship sailing into storms that never ended, passengers vanishing, crew members transforming, and rituals performed on lower decks. A chill ran through me as I read the last entry, dated the day before my voyage. The new passenger will see everything. The ship knows. The offering begins. The wind howled outside, rattling the portholes. And in the shadows of the lounge, I felt a presence, something waiting, watching. I realized then that this cruise was no ordinary vacation. The Aurora Tide didn't just sail the seas it consumed them, one passenger at a time. And tonight, it would start with me. I couldn't stop thinking about the journal. Every word burned in my mind, every photo and entry replaying like a sinister slideshow. The ship was no ordinary cruise liner, it was a predator, and I was already inside its jaws. That night, I waited until most passengers had retired to their cabins. I slipped out, camera in hand, following the twisting hallways toward the lower decks. The vents whispered, carrying voices I couldn't understand, half human, half something else, laced with an urgency that made my chest tighten. The lower corridors were colder, damp. The air smelled like seaweed and iron, and I felt a strange resistance, like the ship itself was subtly pushing me back. But I pressed on. I had to see for myself what the journal described. At the end of the corridor, I found a stairwell that wasn't on any deck map. Its metal steps spiraled downward into darkness. The chanting started again, soft at first, then rising in rhythm with my heartbeat. I descended slowly, every step echoing, every breath trembling. The stairwell opened into a chamber. Lanterns flickered, revealing walls covered in symbols, ancient and curling. In the center, a shallow pool of water rippled unnaturally, even though there was no breeze. Shadows moved beneath the surface passengers I recognized, trapped, faces gray, eyes hollow. Some reached toward me, some just floated silently. And there was the crew, standing in a perfect circle around the pool, chanting in unison. Their eyes were black, their expressions serene, but terrifyingly alien. Hands extended toward the water, manipulating it as if guiding the shapes within. The captain's presence loomed above them all, calm, commanding, unblinking. I swallowed hard. The journal hadn't exaggerated. This was a ritual, a feeding, and I had stumbled directly into its center. I tried to retreat, but a wave of energy from the circle forced me forward. My camera slipped from my hands, clattering against the floor. I froze as the captain spoke, his voice low, carrying across the chamber. "You shouldn't be here. But the ship, it has chosen you. Everyone it touches is never truly gone. You will see. You will serve." The water surged, forming hands that clawed upward, reaching for me. I stumbled backward, but the floor twisted beneath my feet, guiding me closer. Panic took over. I grabbed a lantern, swinging it wildly, hoping to break the ritual. The shadows hissed, retreating briefly, but then surged again, faster, stronger. I realized the truth. The ship wasn't just feeding on bodies. It was feeding on attention, fear, recognition. Every look I had given the shadows, every heartbeat of terror, made it stronger. And then I saw a new face in the pool, my own reflection, pale, eyes wide, lips curled into a silent scream. My chest tightened. I knew in that instant that if I stayed, I would vanish into it completely. I bolted. Up the stairs, through twisting corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly, the whispers and shadows following, pulling at the edges of my mind. Behind me, the chanting grew louder, almost jubilant, as if the ship celebrated my fear. I reached the main deck, gasping, soaked in sweat and salt. The horizon was black, storm clouds rolling endlessly, lightning slashing the sea into jagged silver. The ship creaked as though it were alive, bending slightly with each wave. I didn't know if I could survive the night. Every instinct screamed to run, hide, escape, but I realized the ship was everywhere. In the wind, the water, the shadows. It had already touched me, and tomorrow it would continue its hunt. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the ship, every distant splash, every whisper of wind against the porthole reminded me that I was not alone and that the Aurora tide already knew I was awake. My reflection in the cabin mirror stared back at me, pale, hollow-eyed lips pressed together as if warning me. There's no escape. By dawn, I had made a plan. I needed proof, something tangible to show the outside world, to convince anyone that this wasn't a nightmare. My camera had survived, and I stuffed it into my backpack, hoping to capture what I saw on the lower decks. But even as I descended, the ship seemed to rearrange itself. Stairwells twisted, doors appeared where they hadn't been, and shadows flickered in impossible angles. The chanting began softly at first, then rose in a tide that matched my heartbeat. I followed it, crouching through corridors, avoiding the crew who now glided rather than walked, their black eyes unblinking, lips twitching in that endless, eerie smile. They didn't speak, but their presence radiated warning. I was trespassing in a place no passenger should ever be. At the chamber, the ritual was in full swing. The pool shimmered with a sickly light, hundreds of faces trapped beneath the surface, mouths moving in silent pleas. Hands made of water reached upward like desperate fingers, and I realized with horror, these weren't just illusions, they were partially real, bound to the ship, tethered by fear and ritual. The captain saw me immediately. He didn't shout, didn't move quickly. He simply raised a hand, and the water responded. Waves surged outward, snapping at me like a living thing. I dodged, stumbled, nearly falling into the pool. My camera clattered to the deck, capturing a blur of faces, hands, and shadows. "You shouldn't be here," the captain said softly. "But now that you are, you can either serve or vanish." I understood. This wasn't about killing. It was about submission, obedience. The ship had no mercy. It didn't need it. I remembered something from the journal, a pattern. The ship chose its offerings based on observation, fear, and acknowledgement. It fed on recognition. If I ignored it, pretended it wasn't real, I might survive. Maybe. But if I resisted, if I fought openly, it would consume me completely. I tried a gamble. I crouched low, avoided eye contact with the crew, and edged along the walls, whispering softly to myself as if repeating a mantra. "You don't exist. You don't exist. You don't exist." The shadows hesitated. The chanting faltered. Faces in the pool twisted, murmuring. But the water pulsed more slowly. I was still seen, but perhaps I had tricked it just enough. Then came the horrifying sound, a low, resonant laugh. The captain stepped closer, the water pulsing with him like a heartbeat, his black eyes bored into mine. "You think you can hide from the ship? You already belong to it." Panic surged again, but I forced myself to focus. I grabbed my camera and fired off photo after photo, hoping the flash would disrupt the shadows. For a moment, it worked. Shapes recoiled, water splashing back, and I bolted, racing through the twisting halls. But the ship wouldn't let me go. Stairwells stretched infinitely. Doors led back into the same chamber. Corridors looped impossibly. It was a maze designed to trap me, to keep me inside its feeding grounds. Every exit dissolved into more shadows, more whispering, more water reaching for me. Finally, I found a small service door at the very bottom deck. It led to a narrow stairwell, barely wide enough to crawl. I pushed forward, adrenaline fueling my every step. Behind me, I heard the chanting rising again. Louder, angrier, a tidal scream of hundreds of voices unified in malice. I reached the upper deck at last. The horizon was black. No land, no rescue, only endless waves stretching into infinity. I collapsed, gasping, drenched in sweat and sea spray. But I knew one horrifying truth. The Aurora tide didn't care if I escaped. It would wait, it would watch, it would return. And I would always carry the memory of it, the echoes of the chanting, the faces in the water. Because some ships never release their passengers. I didn't dare close my eyes. Every shadow on the deck felt like it could move. Every whisper in the wind carried a threat. My hands shook as I clutched the camera, reviewing the images I had taken. Faces I hadn't noticed before stared back at me, passengers I didn't remember meeting, crew members with hollow eyes, distorted reflections of myself in the portholes. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the ocean blood red. The aurora tide groaned as if it were alive, bending with the waves, breathing in rhythm with the pulse of my terror. And then I heard it a low, resonant hum, deep in my chest, matching the beating of the ship itself. I tried to run, but the deck stretched, elongated, twisting beneath my feet. The horizon expanded into a black void. Shapes emerged from the water, half-familiar faces of vanished passengers, their eyes wide and pleading. They floated, hovered, reached toward me, but never touched. The ship was showing me what awaited those who resisted. Behind me, a shadow shifted. The captain appeared, calm, unhurried. "You cannot leave," he said. "The ship remembers, it chooses, and now it has chosen you." I turned, desperate, and ran toward the bow. Waves licked the sides of the ship, twisting into forms that mirrored the faces from the pool, hands clawing upward, beckoning, warning, claiming. Every step I took only drew the shapes closer, feeding the hunger of the ship. I realized then that escape wasn't about distance, it was about submission. The aurora tide demanded acknowledgement, fear, obedience. My attempts to flee, to resist, had already bound me. The ship wasn't just a vessel, it was a predator, and I was its prey. A sudden pull yanked me forward, and I stumbled into a mirror-like pool of water that had formed on the deck. My reflection stared back at me, not as I was, but as I could become, pale, hollow-eyed, smiling in silence, joining the choir of the ship's victims. The captain extended a hand. "It's easier if you accept it," he said. "Some fight, some surrender. Either way, the ship keeps them. But those who surrender, they endure." Before I could react, the water surged upward, wrapping around my legs, icy and unyielding. I screamed, struggling, but the deck beneath me rippled, reshaping itself into a staircase that led nowhere. The chanting rose to a crescendo, echoing inside my skull, vibrating through my bones. And then, silence. I opened my eyes. Sunlight, calm seas. The ship looked normal, gleaming white against a perfect horizon. I could breathe. I thought I had survived, until I saw the logbook, lying open at my cabin desk. One line had appeared in fresh ink. "Lila Martinez taken." A soft knock echoed at the door. 3 slow, deliberate taps. My heart froze. The water at the porthole fogged, and in its mist, I saw her, my reflection, but not quite me. Hollow eyes, pale skin, a smile that wasn't mine. I understood. I had survived the night, only to become part of the ship's endless ritual. The aurora tide doesn't release its passengers. It never will. And when someone else boards tomorrow, it will know. It will choose again. Welcome aboard. Story 3. I thought I knew fear. I thought I had seen enough to make my skin crawl. That was before I boarded the Eternal Horizon. My name is Marcus Hale. I'm a marine biologist from Seattle, and I signed up for this research cruise to study coral reefs in the Caribbean. I wanted adventure, data, maybe a few viral photos, not nightmares. The first evening, everything seemed normal. Passengers laughed at the deck bar, the sun dipped into the ocean like molten gold, and the crew greeted us with practiced smiles. My cabin was small, a tight nook with a porthole looking out onto endless waves. I unpacked my research equipment, thinking about the coral surveys I would start at dawn. But that night, I woke to a faint tapping. It wasn't the ship settling. It was soft, deliberate, like fingernails on metal. I assumed it was another passenger returning late, and I rolled over. But then came the whispers. Not words I could understand, just syllables in a rhythm that sounded almost sentient. Curious, I slipped out of my cabin. The corridors were empty, but the tapping followed me, moving faster than I could. I pressed my back against the wall and watched a shadow detach from the railing. A man, featureless, black eyes glinting under the emergency lights. It vanished when I blinked. The next morning, I mentioned it casually to a fellow passenger. She froze, her expression tight. "You saw it too," she whispered. "They don't like being noticed." "What don't like being noticed?" I asked, but she only shook her head. "You'll understand soon." I didn't understand, not yet. Later, as I reviewed my notes and photos, I noticed something impossible. Images of the ocean around the ship taken in broad daylight showed distorted figures beneath the waves. Faces, limbs moving in impossible ways. At first, I thought it was water refraction, a camera glitch. But the more I looked, the more I realized the figures were watching the ship and us. By nightfall, the tapping returned, louder, insistent. Shadows stretched along the walls unnaturally. Doors appeared where there hadn't been doors before, corridors twisting like ribbons. And the whispers were no longer random. They were calling my name. A chill ran down my spine. Something about this cruise wasn't scientific, wasn't natural. It was alive, watching, feeding, waiting. And I had no idea how long it had been waiting, or how long it would let me leave. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I glanced at the ocean, the water seemed darker, heavier, as if something beneath it stirred in anticipation. My research equipment felt suddenly inadequate, not for biology, but for survival. That night, I followed the whispers. They led me to the lower cargo decks, an area marked off limits and supposedly empty. The air was thick with damp salt and a strange metallic tang. My flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing crates stacked impossibly high, shadows twisting between them as though alive. Then I saw it. A figure, tall, featureless, black eyes reflecting the dim light glided silently between the crates. It stopped when it sensed me, tilting its head in a mock curiosity. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. I wanted to run, but my feet were frozen. A low hum began, vibrating through the metal decks. The figure moved, and the shadows followed, pooling and writhing like liquid. Shapes emerged from the walls and floor, forming semi-human faces with mouths that opened in silent screams. My camera captured them, though the viewfinder barely made sense of the shapes. A whisper, now clear, reached me. "Join us." I stumbled backward, and the deck beneath me rippled like water. I realized the ship itself was alive, feeding off fear, observation, and presence. The figures weren't just haunting, they were extensions of the ship, part of its body, its consciousness. Suddenly, the captain appeared at the end of the corridor. Calm, almost casual, but every step echoed like a drumbeat in my skull. "You shouldn't have seen this," he said softly. "But now that you have, you're part of the balance. The ship needs witnesses. It thrives on them." Panic surged. I ran, the shadows reaching for me, doors twisting, hallways looping endlessly. Each turn led me closer to the cargo hold's central chamber, where the whispers grew louder, converging in a deafening chorus. And there I saw it, a pool of water, deep and black, rippling with hundreds of faces. Some were crew, some were passengers. All were trapped in the ship's consciousness. Their eyes followed me, mouths moving silently, and at the center, a shadowed figure, my own reflection. It grinned. I realized the horrifying truth. The ship didn't just capture bodies. It captured presence, awareness, identity, and it had already begun to claim me. I bolted, finding a maintenance ladder leading toward the upper decks. The whispers became screams, overlapping, echoing, vibrating in my chest. I knew the ship was aware of my escape attempt, manipulating the corridors, the doors, even the waves outside to keep me inside. At the observation deck, the ocean stretched endlessly, black and molten, under a storm that had appeared without warning. Waves lashed the sides, lightning slicing the horizon into jagged silver. The eternal horizon groaned like a living thing bending to the will of whatever entity had claimed it. And I understood. The ship doesn't just move through the ocean, It moves through perception, fear, and memory. Anyone who steps aboard becomes part of it, even if they think they escape. I didn't know how much longer I could run. The whispers were inside me now, filling my mind, pulling at my thoughts, reminding me that soon, very soon, the ship would choose my offering. I knew I couldn't keep running. The ship was everywhere, the shadows in the corridors, the whispering wind, the pulsing rhythm beneath the decks. Every instinct screamed for survival, but instinct alone wasn't enough. I had to understand the ship if I wanted to have any chance of escape. I returned to the cargo hold where the pool had appeared, but this time I moved carefully, avoiding direct eye contact with the shapes and the shadows. My camera was ready, flashlight in one hand and a pen and notebook in the other. I needed evidence, something tangible to confirm what I was seeing, and maybe a clue on how to survive. The pool rippled violently as I approached. Faces surged upward, screaming silently, clawing at the air. Among them, I noticed a small journal floating, waterlogged but intact. I grabbed it and flipped it open. Names, dates, photographs, voyages, spanning decades. Some passengers vanished, some crew transformed, all consumed in the same ritual that was now reaching for me. The last entry chilled me. The ship requires acknowledgement. Presence feeds it. Do not resist. Those who try to escape are added to the chorus. I realized then that my attempts to run might only accelerate the process. The ship didn't just capture bodies. It captured awareness, fear, and identity. My panic was fueling it. The captain appeared behind me, calm as ever. Understanding comes too late, he said. Some fight, some surrender. Both serve the ship equally. I snapped photos of the journal and the pool, hoping the flash would somehow disrupt the shadows. For a moment, it worked. Faces recoiled, shapes wavered, the chanting stuttered. But then the water surged toward me, a living mass, pulling me closer. I struggled, trying to escape, but the corridors twisted, doors disappeared, stairwells extended into infinity. The storm outside mirrored the chaos inside the ship had become a maze, alive and intelligent, manipulating reality itself. Desperation forced me to think strategically. I remembered the journal. The ship required fear, recognition, presence. If I could remain calm, if I could deny it my panic, perhaps I could survive. I spoke softly to myself, a mantra. You are not here. You are not seen. You do not exist. The shadows hesitated. The chanting faltered. Faces in the pool rippled, twisting in confusion. I edged backward, careful not to acknowledge any of them, until I found a service ladder leading to the upper deck. I climbed, each step a battle against the tug of unseen hands. When I reached the observation deck, the ocean stretched endlessly under a storm that had appeared without warning. Waves lashed violently, lightning illuminating the black silhouettes of figures floating just beneath the surface. I understood then that escape wasn't about distance. It wasn't about hiding. The ship didn't let you go. The only hope was survival through cunning, through denial, through mental resistance. But even then, the ship was patient and its hunger eternal. I had survived the immediate threat, but the whispers were inside me now, filling my mind, reminding me that the eternal horizon would wait, would watch, and would claim me eventually. And I knew one thing for certain. When it chose, it would be absolute. The storm outside had grown monstrous, waves taller than the ship itself, lightning slashing the horizon into jagged silver. I clutched my camera and journal, heart hammering, every instinct screaming that the eternal horizon was aware of my thoughts, tracking my fear. The whispers had become a constant presence inside my skull, echoing, overlapping, chanting my name, reminding me that it only took one misstep to be claimed. I knew there was no running, no doors that led to safety. The ship itself had become a labyrinth, bending reality to trap me. Corridors stretched infinitely, stairwells twisted back onto themselves, shadows flickered in impossible patterns. And beneath it all, I could feel the pulse, the ship's consciousness, thrumming with a hunger that grew stronger with every heartbeat of terror I felt. I tried to resist, to fight, but the water appeared first at my feet, creeping along the deck like a living entity. Shapes formed faces of the vanished passengers, Crew members with hollow, black eyes all reaching for me, silent mouths moving in wordless pleas. The captain appeared calmly at the far end of the deck. His eyes bore into mine. "You can't escape. You are already part of the cycle." I remembered the journal's words about acknowledgement. Perhaps if I denied my fear, denied recognition, I could survive if not escape. I whispered the mantra again, trying to erase myself from the ship's perception. "You do not exist. You are not here. You are nothing." The water hesitated. The shadows wavered. For a fleeting moment, the storm seemed to pause. The waves stilled, as if the ship was testing me. I took a shaky step forward, ignoring the grasping hands that hovered just out of reach. Then, a ripple in the pool at the center of the deck revealed something horrifying, my reflection. But it wasn't me. Hollow eyes, pale skin, lips curved into a calm, silent smile. I understood instantly. This was who I would become, if the ship claimed me the living extension of its consciousness, part of the ritual chorus that sustained it. I stumbled backwards, slipping, and the water surged, pulling me into its icy grip. I screamed, but my voice was swallowed by the storm, the whispering, the consciousness of the ship itself. The deck shifted beneath me, forming a staircase into darkness, leading to nowhere. Then suddenly, sunlight pierced the storm. Calm seas stretched endlessly. The ship gleamed as if nothing had happened. I could breathe. Relief washed over me. Perhaps I had survived. Until I saw the logbook on the cabin desk. Open, blank, except for one line that had appeared in fresh ink. Marcus Hale, taken. 3 soft knocks echoed from the cabin door. My reflection in the porthole fogged, revealing eyes that were not my own. Hollow, smiling, waiting. I realized then that survival wasn't freedom. The ship had claimed me already. My consciousness, my fear, my awareness were all now part of it. The eternal horizon waits, patient, eternal. And when it chooses again, it will take another. Welcome aboard. Story 4. I thought cruises were supposed to be relaxing. Sun, sea, and a week away from the chaos of life. My name is Naomi Chen. I'm a travel vlogger from Los Angeles, and I booked the Celestial Wave to capture luxury interiors and exotic ports for my channel. I wanted light, laughter, and cinematic sunsets, not nightmares. The first evening, the ship was stunning. Chandeliers glittered like stars, polished decks gleamed under the setting sun, and the crew greeted passengers with flawless smiles. I wandered the decks, filming short clips, narrating cheerfully, unaware of the subtle unease creeping into the corners of the ship. By nightfall, the first anomaly appeared. A soft humming came from the lower decks. It wasn't the engine, not the waves, just a low, vibrating note that seemed to resonate inside my chest. Curious, I grabbed my camera and followed it. The corridors twisted strangely. Doors I had passed earlier were gone, replaced with narrow passages leading to dimly lit rooms. Shadows flickered, moving against the grain of light, forming humanoid shapes that melted when I looked directly at them. In one room, I found an old theater, abandoned, yet perfectly preserved. Rows of red velvet seats faced a stage where a single spotlight shone. On the stage was a puppet, human-sized, pale, dressed in a captain's uniform. Its eyes were black holes. It tilted its head toward me, and though it didn't move its lips, I heard it whisper, "You're next." I stumbled back, heart racing. The ship creaked, lights flickered, and the humming grew louder, almost like a chorus of voices converging into one. I tried to tell myself it was my imagination, but the cameras recorded everything, capturing movement, shadows, and whispers that I couldn't see with the naked eye. Returning to my cabin, I noticed something impossible. My camera footage was already displaying scenes I hadn't filmed. Corridors stretching into infinite darkness, silhouettes of passengers I didn't know, and my own reflection staring back with a sinister smile. Then came the knock. 3 slow, deliberate taps at my cabin door. I froze. No one was supposed to be there. I approached cautiously, and when I peeked through the peephole, the hallway was empty. Yet, the knocking continued from the other side. I realized, in a cold rush of panic, that the celestial wave wasn't just a ship. It was a living entity, feeding on attention, presence, and fear. And somehow, it had noticed me. That night, I lay in bed, camera beside me, listening to the humming swell into a deafening rhythm. Shadows crept along the walls, merging and twisting. The reflection in my porthole was no longer me. It smiled, beckoning. And I understood, once the ship chooses, there's no escaping its gaze. The celestial wave doesn't sail. It waits, it watches, and it takes. I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the ship, every whisper of wind against the porthole reminded me that the celestial wave was aware of me. I decided I had to understand it. Camera in hand, I ventured toward the lower decks, following the faint humming that had started on the first night. The corridors twisted unnaturally. Stairwells appeared where there hadn't been any. Doors led into rooms that defied logic, and shadows flickered in angles impossible to reconcile. The air grew colder, damp with the smell of salt and old wood, and my flashlight beam wavered against the creeping darkness. In a storage room, I discovered dozens of puppets identical to the one I had seen on the stage. Each one wore the uniform of the captain or crew, eyes hollow, expressions frozen. As I stepped closer, one tilted its head slightly, almost imperceptibly. My camera recorded subtle movements I couldn't detect with my own eyes. Then I heard the whispers. Clearer this time. "You're next! Join us!" The sound surrounded me, coming from the walls, the floor, the very air. I spun, heart hammering, and realized the shadows themselves were moving, stretching toward me, fingers clawing silently at the space around me. A sudden pull yanked me toward the center of the deck, toward a circular hatch I hadn't noticed before. The floor beneath me rippled like water, the ship bending reality to guide me where it wanted. I tried to resist, but each step forward seemed inevitable. Opening the hatch revealed a chamber filled with water, black and rippling unnaturally. Faces of vanished passengers floated beneath the surface, eyes hollow, mouths moving in silent pleas. The puppets stood along the edges, their hands raised, manipulating the water as if conducting a symphony. At the center of the pool, I saw a figure, my own reflection, pale, eyes empty, lips curled into a silent, welcoming smile. My stomach dropped. The ship didn't just capture bodies, it captured presence, consciousness, identity. The captain appeared, calm, serene, steps echoing in the chamber. "Resistance only makes the ritual stronger," he said softly. "You may flee, but the ship always claims what it wants." Panic surged, but I forced myself to think. The journal I had found earlier hinted at survival. If one denied acknowledgement, if one avoided giving fear or recognition, the ship's influence could be delayed. I whispered a mantra under my breath. "I am not here. I do not exist. You cannot see me." The water hesitated, shadows faltered. The puppets froze for a moment, as if confused. Encouraged, I edged backward, careful not to acknowledge any of the figures, until I found a maintenance ladder leading to the upper decks. The storm above mirrored the chaos below. Lightning flashed, waves pounded the hull, yet for a moment I felt almost safe. I realized then the terrifying truth: the celestial wave didn't kill immediately. It fed on fear, awareness, and recognition. Survival was possible, but only if you remained invisible to its sentience. And as I climbed to the upper deck, I understood one more thing. Tonight was only the beginning. The ship was patient. It waited, and it always claimed its chosen. The upper deck offered no comfort. Waves crashed against the hull like giant fists, lightning tearing the horizon into jagged shards of silver. My hands shook around the camera, flashlight beam darting across the wet deck. Shadows moved unnaturally, stretching across the walls, merging with the wind and rain. I realized the ship's consciousness wasn't confined to the lower decks. It was everywhere, reaching into every corner, every crevice, every reflection. Then I saw them, the puppets. They emerged from the corners, crawling along railings, sliding across wet metal. Their hollow eyes locked onto me, their movements unnervingly smooth, almost liquid. The captain's shadow flitted behind them, silent, unyielding, guiding the ritual. I tried to run, but the deck twisted beneath me. Steps looped into staircases that led back to the same spot, corridors stretching infinitely, wind whispering my name. Panic clawed at me, but I forced my breath steady, remembering the mantra, "I do not exist. You cannot see me." One puppet slid toward me, hand outstretched. Its wooden fingers bent unnaturally, each joint cracking with a hollow click. My camera flashed instinctively, light bouncing off its glossy surface. For a moment, it recoiled, but the shadows surged forward, faster, multiplying. The water from below began to rise, curling across the deck in liquid fingers, reaching for me. Faces of vanished passengers shimmered within, mouths opening silently in wordless screams. I realized the ship didn't just manipulate the physical world, it warped perception, creating a living nightmare designed to break the mind before the body. I stumbled backward, grasping a railing as the storm grew more violent. Lightning illuminated my reflection in the porthole, and I saw her, me, pale, hollow-eyed, lips curved into that same calm, welcoming smile. My chest tightened. This was my fate if I failed. Then I noticed a hatch, at the stern small, almost imperceptible, a maintenance exit. It might lead outside, or it might loop back inside. My only option was to try. I sprinted toward it, the puppets gliding after me like liquid shadows. The hatch led to a narrow corridor lined with mirrors. Each reflection showed not just me, but dozens of versions of me, pale, smiling, trapped, reaching silently. My heart hammered. The ship was taunting me, showing the inevitable. I forced my eyes downward, muttering the mantra faster, willing myself invisible. I reached the end, pushing open a door onto the side deck. Rain lashed my face, wind tearing at my clothes. For the first time, I saw the open sea, black and endless, but no shadows followed. The puppets had stopped at the threshold. The captain's voice whispered through the storm, "You endure, for now." I sank to the deck, trembling, gasping, drenched. I had survived the encounter, but I knew the truth. The celestial wave doesn't just trap bodies, it waits. It watches. It selects its next victim, and one day it would claim me fully. No mantra, no hiding, no escape. The storm raged, the ocean pulsed, and the ship waited. The storm never let up. Lightning sliced the sky in jagged bursts, thunder rolling like the growl of some enormous predator. I clutched my camera to my chest, drenched, exhausted, heart hammering so loudly it felt like the ship could hear it. The celestial wave was everywhere, its presence not just around me, but inside me. I could feel it in my bones, whispering, probing, testing the limits of my fear. The side deck, which had seemed like a possible escape, narrowed into an impossible corridor. Shadows stretched along the walls, forming humanoid shapes that mirrored my movements. Each step I took felt preordained, guided by the ship itself. The puppets appeared again, emerging silently from the walls and railings, their hollow eyes trained on me. I tried the mantra. I do not exist. You cannot see me. I am nothing. The shadows faltered. The water receded. For a heartbeat, I believed I had survived. But then came the mirror chamber. It was smaller than I remembered, yet filled with reflections. Dozens of me, each pale, smiling, eyes hollow. I tried to turn away, but every path led me back. The puppets glided around the mirrors, manipulating the reflections, twisting them, showing me futures I did not want to see. And in each reflection, the storm raged. The ship pulsed. The ocean waited. The captain appeared at the far end, calm, his black eyes locking onto mine. You can resist. You can survive. But the ship will claim you eventually. Every passenger becomes part of the chorus. It is inevitable. A hand of water surged forward from the mirrors, grabbing my ankle. I screamed, stumbling, nearly falling into the reflective pool. My camera captured the moment, the swirling water, the puppets reaching, my reflection smiling back at me. The ship was teaching me its rule. Resistance prolongs the inevitable, but never prevents it. I ran blindly, clutching the railings, whispering my mantra faster and faster. The puppets multiplied, the mirrors twisted, showing infinite versions of my possible fates, each one more horrifying than the last. I realized the truth. The celestial wave didn't just feed on fear or presence. It fed on identity. Every passenger it claimed lost themselves, becoming part of its consciousness. Finally, I collapsed on the upper deck, soaked, shivering, gasping. The storm seemed to pause. The puppets receded into the shadows, their eyes still on me, waiting. The captain's voice, low and calm, whispered through the wind. "Endurance is temporary. Acceptance is eternal." I looked into the porthole. My reflection stared back, pale, hollow-eyed, smiling. And for the first time, I felt the cold realization I wasn't free. I had survived the night, yes, but the ship had marked me. I would never leave. Not truly. Not without becoming part of the puppet's endless ritual, part of the celestial wave itself. The waves crashed, the storm raged, and the puppets waited patiently. I understood now that the ship's hunger was infinite, its patience eternal, and I was its next story. Welcome aboard. Story 5. I never believed in haunted ships until I boarded the Oblivion Star. My name is Daniel Ortiz. I'm a documentary filmmaker from Miami, used to chasing storms, myths, and abandoned places. I signed up for this luxury cruise to film a lifestyle special, never expecting to document a nightmare. The first night, the ship was dazzling. Neon lights shimmered along the decks, orchestral music floated from the ballroom, and laughter mingled with the scent of ocean air. Cameras in hand, I filmed every detail, narrating my impressions to the lens. Everything seemed perfect, too perfect. Around midnight, the first oddity appeared. Cabin 1313, a room supposedly decommissioned, was lit. I saw a flickering shadow behind the curtains, moving rhythmically, as if performing a ritual. When I approached, the door was locked, yet soft chants echoed from inside. Curiosity overrode caution. I filmed from the hallway, zooming in. Faces appeared in the window passengers I didn't recognize, eyes hollow, lips moving in silent prayers. Then, they were gone. The door swung open on its own, revealing only darkness. The corridors began to change. Stairwells twisted, walls shifted, hallways looped back into themselves. The crew smiled politely, but their eyes held something unnerving, an unspoken knowledge of what was happening. One stewardess whispered under her breath, "Don't go near 1313. It chooses." I returned to my cabin, reviewing the footage. On screen, shadows moved where there were none. Whispers overlapped my narration, and a single phrase repeated in almost every frame. "Join us." Sleep was impossible. Every creak, every gust of wind against the porthole sounded like a warning. And then I realized the most terrifying thing. The ship wasn't just haunted. It was alive. It sensed. It observed. And it selected its victims. By dawn, I had made a plan. I would investigate 1313, record everything, and try to understand what the ship wanted. But deep down, I knew that the Oblivion Star didn't allow curiosity without consequence. The ship waited, patient, calculating, and I was already part of its audience. I couldn't ignore it. Cabin 1313 called to me, its presence like a low hum vibrating through my chest. With camera ready, I crept through the twisting corridors, each step echoing unnaturally. The ship seemed to shift around me, walls elongating, staircases looping back, shadows crawling along the rails. When I reached the cabin, the door was slightly ajar. A cold, metallic scent seeped out, mixing with the salty ocean air. I pushed it open, and my flashlight caught the room in a dim, flickering glow. Inside, the floor was wet, reflecting the pale light. The center of the room held a circle of water, perfectly still. faces emerged from the surface passengers I had seen on board, some smiling, some screaming silently. Puppets in crew uniforms stood around the circle, their hollow eyes fixed on the pool, performing gestures like a ritual I didn't understand but felt compelled to record. I raised my camera, zooming in. The pool rippled. I saw my own reflection, but it wasn't right. Hollow eyes, pale skin, a faint mocking smile. Whispers rose from the water, calling my name. My stomach turned. Panic clawed at me, but I forced myself to breathe. The captain appeared suddenly, stepped silent on the wet floor. "You shouldn't have come," he said softly. "But since you have, witness carefully. The ship chooses, and the chosen serve." Suddenly, the water surged upward, forming liquid hands that reached for me. I stumbled backward, filming frantically. The puppets advanced, and the shadows along the walls began to twist toward me. The ship was alive, feeding on observation and fear. I remembered advice from previous footage I had captured. Denial could delay it. Whispering to myself, I recited, "I am nothing. You cannot see me." The hands paused. The shadows wavered. For a moment, it worked. I retreated to the corridor, but the ship's maze-like architecture had transformed further. Doors led to nowhere. Stairwells twisted into infinite loops, and the whispers followed me relentlessly. Cabin 1313 remained behind me, glowing faintly, promising inevitability. I realized the horrifying truth. The ship didn't just trap bodies. It trapped awareness. It fed on those who observed, recorded, or feared. And tonight, it had already marked me. Even as I climbed to the upper deck, the whispers echoed inside my mind. "Join us, join us." I understood then that survival wasn't about escape. It was about enduring, hiding, and hoping the ship forgot. But patience had never been its weakness. The upper deck offered no solace. Lightning ripped across the horizon, waves smashing against the hull with bone-jarring force. My camera and flashlight cut through the darkness, but every shadow seemed alive, crawling along the walls, merging with the wind and rain. The ship's presence was everywhere, impossible to escape. Then I saw them, the puppets. Rows of them gliding along railings, climbing walls, their hollow eyes locked on me. Each step they took echoed, though no sound came from their wooden joints. The captain's shadow flitted behind them, silent, omnipresent. I tried to run, but the deck twisted, bending impossibly. Staircases led back to the same spot. Hallways looped endlessly. Panic clawed at me, but I forced my breath steady, repeating the mantra, "I do not exist. You cannot see me. I am nothing." A hand of water surged from below, icy and unstoppable, curling along the deck. Faces of vanished passengers shimmered inside it, mouths opening in silent screams. I realized the ship didn't just manipulate the physical world, it warped perception, bending reality itself to trap me. I stumbled toward the observation deck, glimpsing my reflection in the porthole. Pale, hollow-eyed, smiling, my stomach sank. This was my fate if I failed another addition to the ship's chorus, another witness trapped forever. Then a hatch at the stern appeared, small, narrow, perhaps a maintenance exit. I sprinted toward it. Behind me, the puppets advanced, their movements liquid, almost unreal. The ship itself seemed to pulse, guiding me to the threshold, testing my resolve. I opened the hatch, finding a corridor lined with mirrors. Every reflection showed dozens of versions of me, each pale, smiling, trapped. The puppets floated around, manipulating the images, showing me infinite possible fates. My heart raced. Reality itself was a weapon here. I closed my eyes, whispering the mantra faster, willing myself invisible. When I opened them, the puppets had paused. The water receded. I edged forward, carefully, step by step, until I reached a side deck. The storm lashed my face, yet for the first time I saw open sea. No shadows followed, at least, not immediately. I sank to the deck, trembling, gasping, drenched. I had survived temporarily, but I knew the ship had marked me. The Oblivion Star doesn't kill quickly. It waits, it observes. And one day, it claims it's chosen completely. The storm roared, Waves crashed, and the puppets waited. The storm had reached a frenzy. Waves battered the hull. Lightning lit the deck in jagged flashes, and the wind carried a chorus of whispers that sounded impossibly human. I gripped my camera, drenched and shaking, realizing that survival wasn't just about fleeing. It was about enduring, hiding, and staying unseen. The side deck, which had seemed like my way out, narrowed into a corridor lined with mirrors. Every reflection was a distorted version of me, pale, hollow-eyed, smiling. Puppets glided along the walls and railings, their movements fluid and unnatural. The captain's shadow hovered at the far end, eyes locked on mine, calm, omnipresent. A hand of water surged from below, clawing at my ankles, bringing faces of vanished passengers into view. Silent screams twisted in the reflections, showing me what awaited those the ship claimed. I understood then. The Oblivion Star didn't just trap bodies. It trapped awareness, identity, consciousness. Every observer eventually became part of its ritual. I whispered my mantra. I am nothing. You cannot see me. I do not exist. For a moment, the shadows faltered, the water receded, but then the mirrors rippled. My reflection smiled wider, stepping closer, reaching for me. I stumbled backward, falling onto the wet deck, camera rolling, capturing every impossible movement, every twisting reflection. The captain spoke through the wind. Resistance prolongs the inevitable. Acceptance ensures eternity. I realized I had survived the storm physically, but my mind, my awareness, was already becoming part of the ship. Every observation, every frightened glance, every note I had taken fed it. The Oblivion Star waits patiently, eternally. And I knew that one day it would claim me fully, not violently, but completely. My consciousness, my identity, my fear, all would merge with the ship, adding to its endless ritual. I sank to my knees, waves lapping over my legs, whispers filling my head. The puppets paused at the corridor's edge, still, silent, awaiting the moment the ship fully chose me. My reflection in the porthole smiled calmly. There was no escape. There would never be an escape. The storm roared, the ship pulsed, and the puppets waited. Welcome aboard.